This is the Zesty Podcast. I'm your host, Malik Anderson, aka Taka. A new futuristic cyberpunk crime drama follows Xion Juarez and her partner Leon Estevez kicking ass and taking names for the cartel. The comic is called Gunsmoke Icarus, and it's set a millennia after humanity abandoned Earth and crash landed on a far off planet they've named Gaia. Built from the wreckage of an old colony ship, the city of Icarus became an epicenter of Earth culture and, of course, organized crime, which is where our protagonists come in. In the first issue, we meet Xion and Leon on the way to drop off some product in return for payment. However, the deal goes off the hinges, but the two still make it out alive. The debut issue of Gunsmoke Icarus is out now. You can find it on Global Comics. The second issue is on the way. I caught up with co-creator AJ Lynch, who told me all about the behind the scenes of putting the comic together. AJ, welcome to the Zesty Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
So at what point did you decide that you wanted to write a comic book?
So I've been writing really for most of my life. I mean, even as a little kid, I was writing stories and stuff all the time and doing all that. But I never like realized that it was something I wanted to actually like make something out of um, until a few years ago when I really started reading comics, right? Um, I had some friends that like got me really into reading comics and like paying attention to who's writing things, following runs and events and all of that stuff. Like they really showed me the ropes of getting into comics because I had been surrounded by comic related media, like the old school Spider-Man movies, like the beginning of the MCU and like the DC movies and all that stuff. But I had never like actually got into the comics that those things came from until maybe 3, 4 years ago when I had some friends who were always reading comics even before that stuff started, kind of show me the ropes, right? And I'm the type of person that like once I start interacting with something I like, I start thinking, I want to make that. I want to do that, you know?
Wow. So what was the first one? Or like what was the first comic book that your friends shared with you that you were like, "Oh, I'm really into this."
So the first comic that got me into like really reading comics was Jeff Lemire's Moon Knight. I forget which year it was printed, but it was just called Moon Knight. It didn't have a subtitle or anything like that. I collected it as a trade, so it was just like one book that contained the entire run. Um, so all of the issues of that story were all like collected into one graphic novel, and I just read that whole thing in one sitting. And that story was like so good, and the art was so interesting in the way that like it supported the story and like it made me th that particular story is very much like, is what you're looking at real or is it happening inside the main character's mind? And like the way the art really sort of sold that to me, it really got me believing that like comics might be the best way to tell a story.
So you said that you've been contemplating writing a comic for a while after this. But did you like I guess have any practice beforehand in terms of like storytelling? Were there any resources that you found to help like, okay, how do you build a story of a comic book or understanding like that structure?
So really, I mean, the short answer is no. I didn't read any books. I didn't like go through any tutorials. I personally, I'm not really a fan of that stuff, that type of content, because I, when I tell a story, I want to tell the story that I want to tell, and a lot of these like books and like tutorials and that sort of content, I don't want to say that they're bad, but I know that a lot of people, and I've seen it from a lot of people that say that they want to like do something creative, they want to start writing, they see the storytelling medium laid out for them from somebody else's perspective, and then they get clung onto it in a way that where they're just like, this is the way that it's done. So I wanted to just like write my own stories and share it with people and just see what they liked, what they didn't, what I liked, what I didn't, And I mean, the rest is kind of history. I mean, Gunsmoke Icarus isn't the first comic I wrote. It's the first comic I published, but I've written maybe three or four other comic scripts that haven't gotten drawn um, before landed on this story.
Tell me about those others. What were the stories that you were like telling or envisioning for those others? Were they kind of related to Gunsmoke Icarus, have the same cyberpunk vibe, or were they like completely different?
So the my first comic script was actually a Spider-Man fan comic that I was working on with one of my friends. One of my friends who originally got me into comics. He like had this idea, or yeah, he had this idea for like a different version of Spider-Man that um, we ended up sort of like workshopping together, and we bounced some ideas off of each other, and I ended up writing out this script for I wrote an entire issue of a Spider-Man fan comic that like we started working on with actually the same artist that ended up drawing Gunsmoke. We actually started kind of getting some concept art of this fan comic done with him,
Oh
and
wow.
but and maybe I'll show that concept art someday because I do have it, but I've never like posted it anywhere. I think he may have. It was a really cool thing to see like the character that I wrote start to come to life visually, you know. The first original work that I did, I wrote another superhero that was completely my own. I wrote a speedster character, like a Flash, she runs really fast type. Um, and I wrote like a whole first issue that like explains her origin and like how she got her powers and what she's doing and all that stuff. But that never got drawn either. I would love to revisit that character hopefully soon. This story, Gunsmoke, is written in the world that I co-created with my friend Dan Rutledge, and his name is on the cover of the book and everything. He and I sort of we built this world together, right? Because like I told him that I started writing actually. Like I showed him the scripts for Kinetic, which is my speedster superhero, and he was like, "Oh, this is super cool." And then like to continue the conversation, he was like, I've had this like whole story and world imagined in my head since I was a little kid." And I was like, "Well, tell me about it." And so he did, and then that gave me ideas, which gave him ideas, which gave me ideas, which bounced back and forth for like a year straight of us just building this world, writing this story. But the reason that Gunsmoke exists first is because get I wanted to like get my foot in the door with making a comic, right? Because I was like, I hit that wall where I was like, okay, wait. We have this giant project in front of us, and neither of us have any experience. So I took a very, very small piece of that world, and I wrote a small, grounded story that I think is still very important, filled with a lot of like themes that I wanted to tell with characters that I love. And I wrote this like smaller story that ended up being Gunsmoke Icarus.
Which I really wanted to ask you about, like the planet. Part of their world feels very gritty. Um, and I wanted to know, how did you come up with this setting for Gunsmoke Icarus, where it's like this planet that's kind of built off of scraps from old Earth?
So honestly, it's going back so far, I couldn't tell you where the idea started. It was definitely Dan's idea though, to have this city that's built in like the ruins of a colony ship, right? This whole thing was like his idea, where part of like the early versions of the original story was actually to include the humans crash landing on Gaia in the story. Um, but as we were talking about it, Dan was like, "No, what if they've been here a while? You know, what if like humanity just lives on this planet now because for one reason or another they've left Earth in these like massive colony ships and traveled the stars for generations, and to the point where like the people that are alive now only hear fairy tales about Earth, right? That's the point that we're at. And whoever happened to be here when this ship landed on this planet were the original like human settlers on Gaia. Um, and I mean, Gaia is just what they call it. It's a familiar word that like is often used to describe Earth, which is kind of the reason why we went with that name for it. Because you know how humans are. They name everything, even if there's already people there, which there were. You see some of the native Gaians in issue 1 of Gunsmoke. And so there's like a really fun dynamic of like certain I don't want to use the word tribe, but I can't think of a better one. Certain civilizations, there we go, of Gaian people that like decided to hang out with the humans and like become part of their society and like get involved in what's going on in Icarus and all of that stuff. So um I think it's we put together like a really cool complex relationship between the humans that ended up here by accident and the native Gaian people who were already there, you know, and then had to decide for themselves whether they wanted to welcome these people or not, and everybody has their own opinions about it.
You know, um, that's fascinating to me because, like, as I was reading, I really start to get this sense of this like amalgamated human culture, where it's just like all these different cultures and parts of humanity mixed together. Um, and so when you bring in that element of the native Gaian culture, um, but that's not like the society that like they're kind of living in, um, how would you describe, I guess, what this culture has become, like in who they are and the kind of lives they live and the decisions they have to make day to day?
So a big part of the way the culture works in Gunsmoke is like I had the realization that I'm like, okay, all of humanity or the remnants of humanity, everybody that could make it onto this ship, right? Because not everybody did when we left Earth, right? But the entire remnants of humanity that made it onto this ship have been living in a box in space together for millennia.
That would make me claustrophobic.
Well, yeah, and you know, the idea is that the ship is massive, of course, right? But it's still smaller than Earth. And so
It's like a cruise
all
ship.
of right, all of these cultures that exist on the planet that we live on today are, for better or for worse, forced to mix together. And so you end up with this sort of situation where cultures are preserved through, you know, ancestry, but it's also to the point where like the main characters are bilingual, they speak Spanish, but they don't know what Spain is. You know, like they have no idea where this language that they speak comes from.
That's so far in their history.
It's so far
Uh,
back in their history that they're like, these are just the languages that the people around me speak, so this is what happens because I speak English and Spanish because my parents spoke both, and then their parents spoke both, and then their parents, and so on and so forth. The culture just gets preserved by the people that live it. Um, and you also get like that cool sort of intermingling of things. And so when it comes time to like land on Gaia, the humans are kind of sticking to what they know, which is the pieces of the ship that their family grew up in, you know? So you end up getting like this very Night City-esque, cyberpunky city, this sort of melting pot of culture where people just kind of are who they are and they live in the cultures that they were raised in, but they're also surrounded by everybody else. And then, you know, you add in the Gaians to the mix, and then some of that culture mixes in too. And it just creates like a wide range of cultures to be involved in, different classes and different languages and different, you know, ethnicities, and like all of that stuff still exists. Um, Another big part of why that is because I very explicitly written into the background of this world that when humans originally left Earth during the original Exodus, they brought with them like terabytes and petabytes of data of like movies and music and culture and art and books and everything that they could save from the planet that they are leaving, they brought with them, so that they at least had something to look back on in the history of the planet that they came from. So it's not like, like all of the stuff that we're listening to and watching and reading now is all stuff that they still have access to on the ship. And that comes into play when they're in a situation where now they're in the stars trying to survive. People don't really have time or opportunity to become musicians or actors or make new art. So that's where you get like they're influenced by the culture that we currently live on in this day and age, but millennia into the future.
So earlier you mentioned, you know, working on other comics before this and looking at that's how you kind of came across Dante Cutler.
Yes.
And I wanted to know like how exactly did that working relationship evolve between the three of you and what were those early conversations about what this comic book would actually look like now that you've discussed and you've written about it, but like what you wanted it to look like visually on the page.
So I met Dante through the same friend I was working on the Spider-Man comic with. He, shout outs to Brosif. He has known Dante for years before I met him. I think he said he knew Dante for like 10 years by the time he introduced him to me. And they've made comics together before, and they've known each other for a long time. And when I was introduced to Dante, we were talking about the Spider-Man comic and everything. And then sort of parallel to that was when I started talking to Dan about, this story and where it's going and all of that. And around the time of the story beginning, like the early stages of the big story that we were working on, was when we wrote Shion, like as a character, right? And we reached a point where both of us were just like, we want to see what this character looks like. I have some ideas of what she looks like in my head, I can visualize, but um, and that was when I brought up Dante. I was like, he does commissions. He's a great artist. I've seen his work. I was like, let's just pay him to draw this character out of our heads, just like a concept art sheet, independent of being in a comic, just to see the design for this character, right? And that's what we did. We paid Dante, and we sat with him and discussed like what we wanted her to look like, the energy we wanted her to have, like what her face looks like, what clothes she's wearing. Um, and for anyone who knows, I am a huge fan of Black Lagoon, the manga slash anime. And I wanted one of the things I told Dante was I want people to look at Shion and know that I love Black Lagoon. And so like I wanted her to have like the same energy that Revi does, while also being like Latina and a little bit darker and um not like as what's the word I'm looking for? Basically just have her own style to her while still like being an obvious homage to this character that I enjoy, that started inspiring me to write my own characters. A lot of Shion's personality is like borrowed from Revi of Black Lagoon, along with some other characters from other stories. Like Cyberpunk Edge Runners is a huge inspiration for me in general. You can probably see a lot of it in the comic. Um, and so it was maybe 2 3 days of sitting with Dante, and he was actually streaming this whole time. He does stream on occasion, not as frequently as he used to. He had some work stuff come up, but sitting in his stream chat, guiding him and like saying like, yes, I like this. No, I don't like that. Change this, or do this and that, and sort of just like collaborating on the design of this character live while he was drawing her.
Oh,
Um,
that's really cool.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was so cool. And then by the time like she was done and colored and everything, that was it. You know, an original character that I wrote, that me and Dan wrote, but that I wrote, brought to life on a page, you know, and that was the coolest thing I've ever experienced. And I was like, this needs to happen now. This has to be a thing. We have to make this story exist. And so that was when I had originally actually started. I started writing Gunsmoke Icarus as a novel, because I didn't have the resources to um, pay Dante to draw an entire comic, because it's so much work, and you know he does a tremendous job. And we've worked together really closely over like the last year, to make this comic come to life. But it's a lot of work, and it costs a lot of money, and you know rightfully so for the amount of that he has to put into it. But I just didn't have it, you know. So I started writing a novel, and I got most of the way through it. I want to say I was like 70% through the novel, um, telling this story, of Gunsmoke Icarus, and it reached a point where I was like sharing chapters of the novel as I completed them, and like you know letting my friends read it and like getting feedback and stuff, and crafting the story sort of one chapter at a time. Which those chapters do still exist. I might launch them. I might like release them as like some sort of bonus collector's thing, just to see how the story has come at some point someday maybe. Um, because the story is very different now. I had to change so much of it to fit it into a comic, but it's still I like it more now. Um, but it wasn't until Dan stopped me one day and he was like, "Let's just do it." You know, he had come across some money and he was like, "I want to see this comic exist, so let's make it happen."
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we did.
Yeah.
We paid Dante. I took the first chapter that I had written for the novel, I reformatted it into a comic script, and I gave it to Dante, and we agreed on a price. It was paid, and now the book exists. Um, what we did was we set up a Kickstarter for this issue, for issue one. And our goal, which was accomplished, was to raise funds to pay Dante to draw issue two at the same time as paying to print issue one. So everyone who backed the Kickstarter got a physical copy of issue one of Gunsmoke Icarus. And that campaign gave us the money that we needed to pay Dante to draw issue two.
So after all this, the Kickstarter, the starting on a novel, going back and revising, what is something that you learned throughout this process about creating an independent comic book series?
Um, I think I want to. The biggest thing that I realized creating a comic is that if you find the right people and just ask for what you need, you'll probably get it. I found myself in like a couple Discord servers surrounded by like other indie comic creators, artists, writers, letterers, colorists, everybody who does every step of the process, right? And even some like reviewers, some other podcasts that I've been on, same thing. Every single time I have asked somebody for something, they have said yes. So I would just like see somebody who's like, "Oh yeah, I review indie comics," and be like, "Hey, can I be on your show?" And they're like, "Yeah, cool."
So don't be shy.
So don't be shy. It's so easy to be like self-conscious about like the thing that you're making and be like, "Oh no, like I don't know if it's good. I don't know if people are gonna like it, blah blah blah." They're gonna like it. Somebody's gonna like it. Just approach people, obviously be respectful, um, and also be willing to participate in the community. Because if you walk into a room full of like established creators and just slap your book on the table and be like, "Here, everybody support this," nobody's gonna want to help you out, you know. Just like be genuine, be involved, support other people's work. A lot of times, all they want you to do is like share or post or back their Kickstarter for a few bucks. Um, but and that's what I did, and I met some like really awesome people. Um, I mean, I have Stephanie Phillips on the cover of my book with a pull quote, and Stephanie Phillips is an established writer for Marvel and DC. She's written Harley Quinn. She's written like she's written Spider Gwen. That's like her big
Some
one.
big comic books.
Yeah, she's working on Daredevil right now. She just announced that she's writing the new Daredevil run. And all I did was just I interacted with her on TikTok and I was like, "Hey, I wrote a comic. I think you would enjoy it. Can I send it to you?" And she said, "Yeah, sure." So I sent it to her. She read it. She told me what she liked about it, and I asked her if I could quote her on the cover. She said yes, and I did. You know?
That's something that I've been learning, like as a podcaster, a new podcaster, is like there's a whole community aspect to podcasting, which I love. And it's like, if you just put yourself in that community. If
Yeah.
you like enter openly and you reach out to people that you see on social media in general, most of the time they do want to work with you. They do want to speak to you, and you get an opportunity to like learn from what them and pay people respect that you like
Yeah.
enjoyed watching over the years. And so I see a lot of parallels to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
It's
being creative
awesome.
in anything, right? And it's like I have never asked to like work with somebody that I didn't also support, like um I've like looked at people's Kickstarters, I've backed a ton of comic book Kickstarters myself, when I have the spare money to do so. But even if you don't, just like sharing, um, telling people about it, spreading the word, even retweeting people's stuff, like just be in the community and people will notice you.
So I have one final question that I really want to ask you, and this is
Yeah.
a question I've really wanted to ask you a lot of questions, by the way. But like this one is the one that we ask everyone, but tailored to something that you said earlier. Um, you talked about all this physical media or this media that people brought with them on Gaia. If you had three things, just only three things that you could bring that would make you feel your zestiest every single day that you can refer to throughout life, you're going to, let's say, a far off planet with just you and maybe a couple of other people that you know, and the rest of humanity that you may not, maybe not know. What would you bring?
Three things to bring onto a distant planet. Well, I probably assuming I can't cheat and bring my computer because that seems like a cop out answer.
It has all the movies of the great movies that you love saved.
Um, I guess I'll step back from the cop out and say I bring my tablet, because that's how I read comics the most right now. Is digitally that way.
Okay,
Um,
that's one.
yep. Let's see. I would bring my D&D player's handbook because if I'm gonna be trapped on a far off planet with a bunch of people, we're gonna roll some dice or whatever we can fashion to make dice.
I mean, that's a great way to pass the time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's team building. Um,
It'll become a traditional game. You're all
and this is hard because a lot of the things I like to do are encompassed by those two things. Um, I'd bring my cat, I guess.
you know, Pets at one point, some people looked at them as gods. They
Yeah,
love to be worshipped. We
specifically
bring them
cats.
wherever we are. That's a great list. Cats as pets. they literally are so comforting, but also like very real with like their personalities. They're like they put you in check. They're like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
they're like, I want attention from you. And that attention makes you feel better. But then they can take it away.
exactly. And
And you just gotta
they
be
will
like,
take it away.
okay, it's, you have autonomy over your body and how many cuddles you're allowed to have and your
Yeah,
hugs.
exactly.
Well, this has been fun. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your work. I'm
Yeah,
really looking
absolutely. Happy to
forward
be here.
to seeing what comes out next.
For sure. Issue 2 of Gunsmoke Icarus is currently in the works. We're like almost through with like the drawing phase. Um, we're looking to start the Kickstarter for it in January. Just to like dodge the holidays and all that stuff. But yeah, it's coming along. Another cool thing that I'm working on is I'm currently in the process of getting issue 1 set up for print on demand. On a couple platforms, which would basically just mean that you could purchase a copy off of either Global Comics or Comics.one, which are the two platforms where it's currently available digitally. Um, and you could purchase a physical copy, and the company would print your one issue and then mail it directly to you. Because one of the things that like I feel so bad about is people always ask me, they're like, "Can I buy like a physical copy of the book?" And I'm like, I don't have any more. Like, I only had enough resources to print enough to fulfill the Kickstarter backers. Um, so I'm currently in talks with two platforms to set up print on demand solutions, which would allow people to purchase physical copies because I know that a lot of people really, excuse me, really do like that physical media. So I'm excited about that.
Well, everybody listening, look for it there. Gunsmoke Icarus, issue 2. You can find issue 1 on Global Comics with a subscription.
Mhm.
AJ, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you.
you.